Okay. I'm still a little bit under the weather, but I'm going to go ahead and do this because I saw a news piece in somebody's video, because I don't watch the news, but there was something about the sinking of the ground in the valley of California.
And while all the water helped us get out of the drought, That's
the dumbest thing you could have said. What are you, an idiot?
Mark Graywall, a veteran Valley agricultural consultant, has seen this before. The historic flood of 1983.
82,000 acres was underwater.
And yet, the worst is still on its way.
No, this is the start.
Well, the historic string of storms drenched the state and have many wondering whether our drought could soon be over. The storms actually filled many of the state's reservoirs, which could even overflow once all of our snow melts. Well, the historic string of storms drenched the state and have many wondering whether our drought could soon be over.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. There's no wonder you get D's and everything.
It's a valley going from drought to flood.
As we've seen for days now, storm-battered California has been drenched by rain. In fact, trillions of gallons of water have fallen across the Golden State in the last month alone. But that won't end the state's historic drought. It is helping.
A reminder from Mother Nature. She's the one calling the shots. Joe Rosado Jr.
You don't mess around with Mother Nature.
NBC Bay Area News.
And I won't do any Valley Girl impressions or accents, so you don't have to worry about that. But I'm talking about the San Joaquin Valley. So we're going to take a quick look at that. But first, a little teaser. Did you ever know about Lassen Peak? Now, I had heard of Mount Shasta, and I knew that that was something considered somewhat possibly volcanic, like Mount Rainier. But I hadn't heard of Lassen Peak, nor had I heard of the Mount Lassen 1915 eruption that was apparently caught on, with still images, but also video. So they have video of a 1915 eruption somehow, but then Mount St. Helens, they never got a video of that. That Mount St. Helens, I did a video series about that. It's so sus. It's so quite obviously something nefarious. When you just see the white smoke, sounds familiar, right? Big cloud of white smoke, and you don't see liquid hot magma or lava or anything like that. It's not quite the same type of volcanic eruption, I think. Now, you've heard me, I talked about Lake Gargantuan is what I called it. It's the giant lake. It's where there's nothing on the map. And it dawned on me about these maps. They say it was because explorers couldn't get out there because too many wild buffalo or too many Injuns, so they couldn't map out the land. Yeah, right. We're told about the glaciers, the ice being thousands of years, 10,000 plus years ago, a mile thick. It doesn't make sense. And then we're told about, the glaciers carrying the rocks, the erratics, the rocks from far away. And then we're told about the glaciers turning to water because, the sun is a thing. I don't care about ice age, no ice age. When you're at a certain latitude, the sun pounds down with a certain amount of energy that will melt stuff in the summer. Believe you me, boy. Believe me. Plus, the ocean water could get the melt started. I mean, come on. Was the ocean iced over? How did they explain this stuff? Well, to me, it's quite obvious there was an inland lake that got busted open, and it flooded out all over the place. And it's what they call, they have different names for it. I call it Lake Gargantuan, and it's on the maps, the very old maps, that also show the island of California. I believe they were fairly accurate, and that it was an island, perhaps, or something very close to it because of all that inland water. And I believe it was probably salt water because of the sea life and the amount of salt, the salt flats, etc. And there's several things associated with that, with the long age problems of salt accumulation when you have water that doesn't drain out to an ocean, then it evaporates, so the salt remains because the salt doesn't evaporate, and the salinity goes up, up, up. And if you look at the Great Salt Lake and other lakes that don't have an outlet, the salinity goes up, up, up. Like we've seen it in recent times with the artificial lakes, like the lake in California that is, what would they call that? It's like Saline Lake or something. I'll insert the correct name in here. But that lake was a tourist destination until it got to be too salty because it's not healthy for a lake to not have an outlet. Well, I think because it wasn't super salty, yeah, there was probably California being an island, and you can see that with the ages of the trees. When you have the sequoias, really old trees, that's the original land, and then you have this filled-in area between the mountain ranges. So, for example, between Mammoth Mountain and Glass Mountain, you have the Long Valley caldera, and they say there's a resurgent dome, and they say it's because of partially molten liquid hot magma. But I don't necessarily think so. And it has a basement. Wow. Bishop Tuff, I don't know. But that's just the fill. That's where the stuff slid in. It's quite obvious. And so when you look at it from the plane, and I took lots of pictures when I was flying over all this stuff, thinking of you guys to share it right here, that's all quite visible. It's quite visible. And when you look at the geologic map of California and the ancient Sierra granite, well, that's the original. That's not the fill. And then you've got the sedimentary fill. Well, guess what, folks? All that sediment being fairly new, it's going to kind of wash away and it's going to sink. And they have to call everything devil. I swear, like everything. I knew going in that I'm like, how many things are going to be called devil? And I found a bunch I didn't even include here, but this is Devil's Slide. Sediments deposited with changing sea levels along the coast. Oh. So they have their explanations with the Franciscan subduction zone and the Smartville terrain, spelled a certain way. And they have their millions of years, 175 million years ago and 225 million years ago. But we know better than that. And so what's original? Well, wherever sequoias and redwoods grow, probably because they were there. I think this took place after they were already well matured from saplings. Like in Yosemite National Park, the geologic oddity of the Half Dome Rock, that would have already been there, okay? So that would have been one of these islands, perhaps, where they show that in the older maps. And if you take a look at these newer maps of the different types of rock, you can see the San Joaquin Valley is really, it's just fill dirt that just kind of washed in. Now they say, oh, it's young, quote, air quote, young, less than 15 million years old. Well, yeah, like way less, like 14.999 million years less. And what they show here in this slide by slide, side by side slides, they just forget the millions of years time frame. This is probably fairly accurate because they're not really stupid. They just go off the wrong premises. And so if you wipe out the long time view of it and go by the premises that you can actually verify and validate and observe and test and recreate and all this type of stuff, well, can't exactly recreate it on the scale, but you can recreate it on a smaller scale in a very short time. Yeah, this kind of makes sense, and it shows how California would have been an island at one point. And that's just a small area. So there are some anomalies, and I don't have all the answers, but I will acknowledge and revisit some of these anomalies, like Sutter Buttes. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but we're going to call it that, Sutter Buttes, or Buttes, I don't know. But it's just like this sticky, uppy part of the San Joaquin Valley where everything flowed in. It kind of, you can see it kind of swirled around. And somebody really did a good job of doing that. Now, what was there? Well, they do acknowledge that there was an ancient lake there, and it's becoming a lake again because the ground is sinking, and we'll take a look at that because it's kind of silly for them to say that the ground is sinking the way they are saying it. I'm saying, of course the ground is sinking, and it will always be sinking because it just washed in. What do you expect from like washout dirt? What does washout dirt do? It just kind of pooled in that valley, but over time it's going to work its way out, and it's going to see things want to turn back into what they were originally. One line from the TV series Better Call Saul, or maybe it was from Breaking Bad that I saw, where Saul Goodman said something that just kind of caught me. And it's one of these intelligent things you hear someone say, and it resonates. And he said, it's always got to be a desert, where he's out in, they're in Albuquerque, and it started off as a desert, and they try to make it different things, lush, green, landscape. It's always trying to be a desert. It just wants to be a desert. That's what it is. And where I live is kind of a swampy forest area. So it's always trying to be a forest. I mean, they drained it pretty well, but if there's a lot of rain, it can kind of flood up. But there's tons of mosquitoes around here in the summertime because it's always trying to be like a swamp. It's the Great Black Swamp. And then forest, I mean, there's no like shortage of trees. It's almost impossible to get rid of all the trees. I don't know how the entire state was clear cut by like 1830. It boggles my mind. That's another story for another video. But here you can see Corcoran Lake is what they call it. And yeah, right there where the valley is. Well, they didn't work very hard on that. But the Sutter Buttes, I took some snippets from a couple different places because it just seems like whatever the ancient antediluvian civilization was, the remineralized structures or whatever was there, kind of got washed in the cataclysmic event that washed in all this sediment. It swirled around this kind of island, maybe fortress area, huge castle area, and that's what I think the Sutter Buttes is, and that's why it's so off limits. It's totally off limits. It's owned by ranchers. It's not federal land per se, but the ranchers don't allow people on there, and there are various reasons and stories and excuses for that, and the backstories go back. They allow approved ranchers there, but they do have these guided tours, and then there's a few people who kind of go rogue and go and film stuff, and there's nothing earth-shattering except maybe this brick wall that I found. You could say, oh, that's not brick. Those are the lichens that are that color. Okay, forget about the color. Think of it as black and white. It kind of looks like brick and mortar, but whatever. Make up your own mind. Whatever. But that's Sutter Buttes, Sutter Buttes, whatever. Butter Butts. So somebody did this work, which I thought was good work. The time, millions of years, etc., that's not correct. I don't know if they were exactly saying that, but they did figure out how deep it is and how it swirled around and everything, and by the erosion. It was a rapid, sudden, cataclysmic event. So yeah, it's sinking. Everything's sinking. Everything's eroding, except this wall. It's so obviously a wall. I mean, come on. Can people deny that? But yeah, the Sutter Buttes, you can see how it flowed out, and it flowed out in the different directions. Now, could it have been a cataclysmic event from some kind of a volcanic thing? Well, I don't think there's that much ash to justify that. There is a lot of ash in certain areas like the Badlands. I'm not a geologist, and I do appreciate the work that they do and what they find. It's just they're working off the wrong premise. That's what I'm here to say, is think about it differently, of a shorter time frame, and how simple can it be? That it was a giant lake, and it busted, and it filled it up, and it could have just been hundreds of years ago, maybe 1,000 years ago, not 10,000 plus. And what would you expect to see? Well, you'd expect to see this kind of stuff, and why would they hide it? Why is there so much off-limits land out there? Well, I took some pictures from the plane to show what I saw. But I saw some things I couldn't get a picture of that there's no point in me telling you about it now because I can't back it up with the photo, but it was interesting, at least in the moment. But anyway, that'll be the subject of another video. So be sure you remain subscribed and keep watching if you care to not miss that. So there it is. But now scientists are catching up. They warn of a mega flood that could drown, that's clickbait, drown the entire U.S. state. Well, it's kind of happening because look, if you go to the public domain library at Stanford, right there in their own state, they have it drawn up how it was. And I bet you Sutter Buttes is one of those 4 islands. I'm not sure. But it's quite obvious how the thing filled up. And the lake they show off to the right is a lot bigger than that. We'll just put it that way. So there was a lake and it busted and it filled up, or from whatever means. But even in recent times, going back about 150 years or so, and you have this lake, which is reforming and reappearing. Surprise, surprise. It's not unheard of, but they're getting the rain that they've always wanted, and now they're complaining about that. But there it is in the maps. So, from the 1800s to today, it already looks like it was filling in, and then now, at some point, it's turned, probably in the past 10 years or so, because of erosion and sinking. After it fills in, then as more water comes in and saturates it, it's going to move the sediment out. So what would you expect to see? Well, it's going to go back to the way it was that they show of the ancient world history. Now, how could there be ice? Like in the top left corner of this map exercise. Okay, let's work it. You're maniac on the map. Look at the top left. How could that be? Ice, really? Did the sun get farther away from the earth? Like, how could they explain that there would be ice there? Did they mean just in the winter? Because even then, the ocean temperature would not allow for the ice to be there. That's pretty haphazardly drawn, and it's not really well thought out. But they have to have the glacial ice to explain the erratics, because they can't explain it by the Lake Gargantuan, because that's probably what they steer away from. Now this map, how America got its giant lakes, ice age weather caused massive bodies. See here, this is more, I think, more accurate to what it is. It's just they don't have it filled in. They're touching on it. They're just dipping their toe in the water, so to speak, and they're not going for it, because it was a solid body of water. It was huge. It was elevated, and when it bust open, it filled up that island, the San Joaquin Valley, filled it up with the sediment from the debris. So that's it. And, I kind of rushed through it, but I really want you to think about that and consider, because it's so quite obvious. Now with earthquakes and things like that, a lot of them are man-made, but then in this case, some of these, I think it's just the settling. So when you have a lot of sediment, by just the force of gravity and whatever moving it down and out, or it settles, the ground will sink. Now they said the ground is sinking because they're pumping water out of it. But that doesn't make sense, because if you take earth, whether it's dirt or rock, and you put it in water, what does it do? Does it float or does it sink? It sinks. So if you pump water out, yes, maybe you can compact it a little bit more if it's saturated. But I don't think that really explains the sinking. I think that's a cop-out. I think it really is. Because at other times, they say the weight of the water pushes it down. They say when something is filled up with water, that the weight of the water pushes the lake bottom down. I've heard that said before by geologists. Maybe at some point that becomes true when it's so supersaturated and you add more weight. Maybe that does work that way, but I don't know. So that's all. I'm signing off. Take a look at some maps as the video finishes up, and thanks for watching. Be sure to support the channel. In the links below, there are many options. Thank you.